In this movie, we'll take a look at the only old school transformation tool that we've neglected so far, and that's the reflect tool. And so I'm going to start things off by selecting everything that's on the flowers layer by clicking in its upper right corner, as well as everything in the swirls layer by shift clicking in its upper right corner. And so as you can see, that selects everything but the text. And now I'll drop down to the rotate tool icon, click and hold on it, and choose the reflect tool, which has a keyboard shortcut of O, which might seem a little weird because there's no O in the word reflect. But the great thing about this shortcut is that an O is the most symmetrical letter that there is. So in my mind, it makes a lot of sense. All right, now what you can do is click, if you like, to set a transformation origin, and then you can drag like so in order to define an axis. So imagine that there's a straight line between my cursor down left here and the transformation origin, which is that cyan target in the upper right region of the document. Imagine that there's a straight line between those 2 points, and that line is a kind of mirror. And so everything is reflecting across that mirror. And so if I were to release, for example, then I would flip those shapes. Well, that is one way to use the tool, but it's not necessarily the most intuitive way. Here's how most folks use it. I'll go ahead and press Control-Z or Command-Z on the Mac to undo that change. And then I will press the Alt key or the Option key on the Mac and click on this vertical guideline in order to bring up the Reflect dialog box. Now, it might seem strange that axis is currently set to horizontal, and yet we performed a vertical flip. And that's because we're not talking about the kind of flip we're performing. We're talking about the axis about which we're reflecting these objects. And so if I want a horizontal flip, then I need to turn on the vertical radio button in order to achieve this effect right here. Your other option is to angle the axis. And so, for example, if I selected angle and change this guy to, let's say, 45 degrees, I would end up with this effect because I would have a mirror that's going at a 45-degree angle, and so everything's flipping across and down. But of course, that's not what I want in this case. I want vertical. So I'll go ahead and select the vertical radio button, and then I'll click on the copy button, or again, you can press Alt-Enter here on the PC, or Option Return on the Mac. All right, now I want to flip everything vertically across the horizontal axis, and so I'll press and hold the Control key or the Command key on the Mac to get my last used arrow tool, which happens to be the black arrow, and I'll also press the Shift key. So I've got Control and Shift down here on the PC. You'd want to be pressing Command and Shift on the Mac. And then just go ahead and partially marquee these objects here. This guy, all these swirls, by the way, are a big group, so they're pretty easy to select. And then when you release the Control key, that'll take you back to the Reflect tool, at which point just go ahead and Alt or Option click anywhere along the horizontal guideline in order to bring up the Reflect dialog box. Obviously, that's not what we want, so go ahead and change the axis to horizontal in order to produce this effect here. And then once again, click on the Copy button in order to reflect a duplicate of those shapes. All right, now I'll press the V key to switch back to my black arrow tool, and I'll go ahead and click off the path outlines to deselect them. And that's how you use the very old and equally venerable Reflect tool here inside Illustrator.